What camera? Over here. Hi folks, welcome to our Friday night live with Kip Christensen. So we are here in Grand Bay, New Brunswick. This is our first wood turning seminar, workshop that we've hosted here. And Kip's been a friend of mine for a long time. He's a world-class wood turner, also retired university professor. So he's one of the few that can do it and teach you equally as well. So he's been here. We did 3 days of a spindle turning workshop, which was kind of a beginning class, taught you how to sharpen your chisels, how to turn spindles. And then the second half, which started yesterday, is on bowl turning and box turning, and Kip will show you all of that stuff, and potato turning. That's be saved for a little bit later. So without any further ado, I'm going to have Kip come up. I'll let him introduce himself, tell you a little bit about where he's from, what he does, open to questions. Don't worry about the live streaming thing unless you're really camera shy, but most of the camera's going to be right here. Kip, it's all yours. We supposed to clap?
Well, thank you, Rob. I appreciate that brief introduction, and I've appreciated the friendship that I've had with Rob over, what, 4 decades or something like that?
It has been.
We met in the late 70s, early 80s, and anyway, we've kept in touch since then, even though we've lived a long way away. And he pursued hand tool woodworking, and I pursued wood turning. And anyway, it's been a good trip, I think, for both of us. But I don't know how much of an introduction that you're interested in, Rob, but as long as I can remember when I was a kid, I've been interested in doing a couple things for my life and for a living, and that was making things and teaching. And so when I went to get my education, it was in industrial education and then in vocational education. I got a bachelor's and a master's and then eventually a PhD. And I've taught at Humboldt State University, and I taught for 32 years at Brigham Young University. I taught woodworking and furniture design and manufacturing with wood, plastics, and metals, and worked with student teachers that are out in the public schools doing their student teaching, and I worked with their mentors, so I was able to go into the schools and see what was happening there and see their programs and their facilities, and I enjoyed that a lot. And so part of that was we in our program prepared students to teach, and of the professors that were in our program, I was the maker guy, and so I was the one that taught the classes on how to make things with various materials. Which I really enjoyed because my classes were always interesting because the students designed the things they made, and then I helped them learn how to draw the plans up and make them, and there were always different projects going, and so every semester, even though there was a similar curriculum, there were different projects, and so it was always fresh. And in the furniture design class, which was an advanced class, the students seemed to, on a regular basis, keep me pushed in doing things that I hadn't done before because they were designing things that were very unique, and it was fun. I really enjoyed it a lot. Life's been good to me. My wife, actually, she's on her way here from Springville, Utah, where we live. She arrived in Bangor just an hour or so ago, and she'll be joining us tomorrow, and then we're going to be touring for a week or so in New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island and around this beautiful area that we look forward to. So Rob asked me to give a demonstration tonight, and so I don't plan to do much talking. I'll demonstrate. I'll try to talk a little bit as I go along so that I can explain some of the things that I'm doing. If you have questions, go ahead and raise your hand. I'll try to take them. I'm okay to stop and take them if I need to, otherwise I'll just keep going. I've got 3 or 4 projects that none of them take a long time, but hopefully they will be of interest to you to watch it. So any questions before I start?
Can you show them some of the stuff that we did this week just so they get an idea of what you've been doing?
Well, I actually put it away.
Your trees there.
Yeah, we did. So in the spindle turning class, the intent of the spindle turning class was to take students here that have done little or no lathe work before And it was taught with the assumption that they really hadn't had experience. Most of them that came to the class had had none or a little bit. And so I started off with the principles of getting good clean cuts and how to do that, and we did some exercises that helped build those skills and that muscle memory that makes that happen. And then we did several projects that applied the skills and the techniques that they learned. The projects that we did included an egg, which is a good project to help your eye see the form of an asymmetrical curve, which is a beautiful classic curve in nature that we find and is just always enduring and always a safe curve to use in designing vessels and bowls and other things. We also did a sphere where we took a chunk of wood that was basically square and turned it into a sphere, which also taught some other turning techniques and also how to train your eye to see a symmetrical curve. And then we did a parting tool exercise that was a little Christmas tree like this, which is a good way to learn how to make controlled cuts with a parting tool. And we did, what else did we do? Yeah, and then I demonstrated another thing or two. And then the next day we did inlaid boxes. I didn't know I was going to show these pieces, Rob, so.
You want me to dig them out while you're talking? I put some other stuff up there too that you did. Your bowl and the pencil case.
So I've enjoyed doing inlaid boxes for a long time. And we did a simple one similar to this. The one I did in the workshop this week had one inlay, and I don't know if you can see that. Oh, we're not on that, huh? Okay. This one has two inlays in it, so this is made out of pear and then bloodwood and black palm, but it has a couple inlays in it, some decorative chatterwork. It's like a jewelry box that has a friction fit lid. So it looks like a fairly simple piece, and it is simple, but there's a lot of really technical aspects to turning it to get everything to fit just right. And so that was one of the things that we did. And then today we did a bowl out of green wood. Tomorrow we'll do a bowl out of dry wood. So we've covered a lot of material. For the students, it was a little bit like drinking from a fire hose, but a fun drink. Kool-Aid or whatever. Hopefully it wasn't a bitter drink like vinegar. Are we ready to go?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. All right. So this first little project that I'm going to turn here, I've done a few of these over the years. Let me get my safety glasses on. And I'll get the finish so it'll be ready here when I need it. But what I've got here mounted on the lathe between a drill chuck and a hollow cup center is a blank for turning a spinning top. I'll do this. This is a fairly quick project. I will turn this one start to finish using one tool. And we won't sand this one. We'll just put some finish on it, and hopefully it'll be a clean enough cut that it will be all right. So I'm taking the square corners off. Can you hear me okay? Taking off the square corners. Then I'm going to turn what will be the top side of the spinning top. I'll put a little bead down here at the bottom. Come in here with a cove and add another little bead next to it. Then the bottom side. Check to make sure it's nice and clean on the cut there. Okay, so the turning is done. I'll take some finish.
What was that made out of?
The top? Well, it's a material called Spectraply. It's dyed birch veneers, dyed in various colors and then laminated. Laminated so that the grain is parallel in each lamination. So unlike plywood where it's cross-banded, these are all parallel in grain. So when you work with them, they're quite a bit similar to working with regular woods. I'll cut the end off here. So there we go. There's our spinning top. I said I was going to do 3 or 4 projects. I think I'll do 3 more of these and then we can go fishing. Right? Something like that. I don't know if this shows in the camera or not, but there's your spinning top. No sanding, right off the tool. And it's nice when you can have a project where you can do that occasionally. So while I get set up for the next project, any questions that have come to your mind about that or how it was mounted or?
You mind if I pass the box around?
No. No, and the
Try not to roll it on the floor.
Now that blank that you got there, is it all one piece of wood or one piece or a plan? The blank?
Yeah, the blank.
Okay, so what I do is I drill a hole and put a birch dowel in the center of that.
Yeah.
So it's got the Spectraply, which I buy in sheets, and those things are already glued up, ready to go. And so I just put the dowel in the middle and turn it. So here's a box that I did in a demonstration this week that doesn't have an inlay, but it's got some decorative chatter work. And I try to make these boxes so that they've got a nice, gentle vacuum resistance on the lid. And so I'll pass this around and you can feel that. It makes, you have to have a pretty accurate cut for that to happen, or it's too loose or too tight.
Well, it'll get loose, and then it'll have to stay loose.
Yeah, you can do that as well. Let's see, I'm going,
You mentioned, Kurt, in your introduction that you turned some greenwood.
greenwood, yeah. Wood when it's wet, fresh cut.
Oh, you said that one was pear. I think you said turned a lot of fruit trees, and I quit because they would change shape on me, especially if you did like a series of bowls, like a bowl and a bowl and a bowl and a bowl.
Right.
Some crack, some expand, some shrink. How do you preserve them? I mean, I've tried peg, I've tried sawdust, I've tried everything that you can imagine, and I'm not saying it didn't work, but probably I've got a 50-50 throwaway.
And you're talking more specifically about fruit woods, right? So did you hear the question there, or do I need to repeat the question?
Yeah.
Okay, the question was, this gentleman here has done some turning and he's asking about using fruit woods where he's had problems with the fruit wood because it's so unstable, moving and warping, changing shape or cracking. And that is one of the features of fruit wood. Sometimes we can use that to our advantage. Usually it's something that we have to put up with. But to answer your question, if you take, for example, an apricot or a cherry or a plum, one of those trees that's got a dark heartwood and sapwood, if you want to have wood that won't crack, you have to cut through the pith, get rid of the pith, the very center of the tree, and you also have to cut out the sapwood. So you only work with heartwood. If you have sapwood in a piece that's next to heartwood, they have a different expansion-contraction ratio, and the sapwood shrinks a lot more than the heartwood, and it sets up stresses and it cracks.
You turn it with the grain or against it?
You can do either. It turns very nicely, green or dry, but in order to keep it from cracking, you need to have a piece that generally, there are exceptions, but generally that is either all sapwood or all heartwood, because they...
You got a big tree.
Yeah.
You can't just do branches.
unless you want to do small spindles. You know, I've made a lot of handles for things out of heartwoods and fruit woods, and it's beautiful wood. It's wonderful to work with. Apricot is actually one of my favorite woods. I've worked with probably a couple hundred different kinds of woods, and apricot's one of my favorites. Yes?
I got into wood turning quite a while ago, and I found it very therapeutic. But what I find with wood is, and I had a lot of trouble with making bowls, cracking in that. As I was going along making bowls, I left them on the metal plate, and it helped stop it from cracking. The metal plate sort of
On the faceplate? On the faceplate?
absorbed the moisture in that, and the bowl never cracked. So I was doing pretty good.
Well, I think you must have been living right, because that's not been my experience. But, you know, if it works for you, how can you argue with success? But my experience has been that for the most part, wood does what it wants to do. And so we kind of have to bend to its will, generally speaking. But once you know what that is, you can do that. And you can use those quirks that wood have to their advantage. For example, you can take a piece of wood that is very unstable. Madrone burl is one of those, very unstable wood. And you can turn it into a bowl that is really thin-walled, thin enough that the inside can dry at the same rate as the outside. And when it dries, it'll be kind of like a napkin that you kind of crinkled up and threw out on the table, and it partially opens up. It just warps like crazy, and it's one of the fun things that you can do with that wood. Yeah. So some woods are more stable than others, and people that have taken advantage of the instability of those woods have done some really interesting work with them, actually. I'm going to need a tool rest that's a foot long. If we got a longer tool rest, there may be. Okay, so the next project we're going to do here.
Do you want the black one, Kip?
That one there. Thank you. The next project we're going to do is a bud vase. Now, among wood turners, a bud vase is basically defined by a piece of wood that is turned to a vase form, but is not hollowed out like you would have on a glass vase, a ceramic vase. But it's a great project to learn how to use the tools to do several different cuts, to make curves, beads, and coves, and then also to design pieces that have good proportions and lines and shape and form. So that's a really good exercise for people that are learning to turn, because you get to use several different tools, several different cutting techniques, 3 different chucking methods in the same project, and you can make a project that doesn't take a long time, but you have a good form, but you don't have to take the time to hollow it out, which nobody sees the inside anyway, right? So I've got a piece of Cuban mahogany, is that right?
Yeah.
That I'm going to mount between centers. Before I do that, I'm going to turn the speed down, because I don't want it to start up at the same speed that I was turning the top at. So I'll put a drive center in the headstock. Bring the tailstock up into position.
Jeff heard butt vase. You meant bud vase, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. A bud vase. Some people call them a twig pot. They don't have a large opening, but we usually bore a hole that is somewhere between 3/8 and maybe up to an inch or so in diameter. You can put a test tube in there to put water in if you want, but usually if people put something in it, they usually put in some dried flowers, a simple arrangement of dried flowers, and they can be fun for that. So this wood is dry. Cuban mahogany, I believe, that we raided from Jake's wood pile. Been sitting there for years, but now he's going to miss it all of a sudden, right? Is that how that goes? And I'm going to zip up my turning smock here because I've learned that one of the fun things about turning is you can make a mess in a hurry. And if you're not buttoned up good, you can get shavings in places that you don't have places. So I'm going to button up and rotate the spindle so I make sure that it clears the tool rest. The tool rest just supports the tool, but the cut is completely in my hands, and I'll use various tools, but okay. I'm going to take the square corners off. I'm holding my hand so I'm shielding the shavings from coming up and hitting me. Just taking off the square corners.
What are you using? What are you using?
What tool? Spindle roughing gouge.
That's cool.
So all of those previous cuts were rough cuts. Now I'll clean it up a little bit more.
Plug.
The last cut is going to be slow. I've got an angle that allows the shavings to be cut without changing direction very much. It's a peeling kind of an angle, and it looks like we're down to round. Next thing I'm going to do here is turn a dovetail shaped spigot on the end of it. For this I'll use a skew, which is a wonderful tool. It's versatile for the different cuts that you can do with it. And I'm just going to turn a dovetail shaped tenon that I can put in the jaws of my chuck. And that's all we need to do on this one between centers.
You put your tool rest, you put it about halfway up?
It's close to center. It varies a little bit with what tool you're using and the cut that you're making, but usually you want to contact the wood. Your tool wants to contact the wood at center height or slightly above it. And so we adjust it based on the cut and the tool we're using, but it's usually not below. Not though the tool contacting below, not intentional.
Right.
Right? You're smiling back there. Okay, so you can see this dovetail shaped tenon. Those dovetails will be the same angle, at least very closely, as the jaws on the chuck. So I can open those up a little bit, push that in, snug it down, and snug it down good and tight.
What chuck is that?
We call it a scroll chuck. This particular one is a Vic Mark, if you're wondering about the brand. The question was, what kind of chuck is it? I'm going to bring the tailstock up, put just a little pressure on it, not much. I want to true up the end and make sure that it's centered well. So I'll take a small bowl gouge that I've ground like a spindle gouge. I'm going to move the tailstock out of the way and remove the hole that was made from the point on the tail center. That's just in case this may have shifted a little bit as I put pressure with the jaws on the wood. And then I'll take my skew, put a little pilot hole, and now I can bring the tailstock up and it'll be perfectly centered. And it was pretty good before, but it needs to be centered really well because later on we're gonna bore a hole in that, and we want that hole to be right in the center. Okay, so
Out of there.
Rob said that in this demonstration you're going to watch some techniques about what people would use if they were making furniture. How many in here do make furniture? How many of you do turned parts for furniture, like legs and rails and so forth?
Right
Okay.
there. You can see a lot better.
Well, it's one thing to make a turning that has a particular shape and form and dimensions and so forth. It's another thing to make several of them that match, right? You can make a table leg. You go to make the second one, and it may be a little bit different. And then so you have to adjust those two to be right, and then you put the third one. Well, what I'm going to show you here is a technique. This is not a duplication technique. It's hand turning. I am going to be setting some things by the calipers, but I'm not really measuring anything. I've just cut out a template that I'm going to use as a guide. And let's see. Could you grab me, Tony, could you grab me one of those magnets right there? Thank you. Just going to put this here so I can see it. But yeah, so this is a technique that I showed the students in the class where if you've got a piece of wood that you want to make a project out of, and you're not sure exactly the shape and form proportions that you want to make, you can take a piece of paper and cut it the size of your piece of wood and fold it. And take a bunch of those, cut them, open them up, and you can see what it would look like if it was turned. Okay, so I don't want to lose that little part, actually. It just tore off. So it's a good way to quickly design some forms for a particular piece of wood or project, and do all of your design thinking on paper rather than on the lathe, which doing it on the lathe is time consuming and it's expensive as far as wood, so forth. So I've got this piece here. This is what we're going to make. I've got the top of this has already been cleaned up. So I'm going to lay it in there, and I've got one, that's a critical diameter. I'm marking the critical diameters, and as I mark the critical diameters, I'll also be marking the critical distances along here. So that's the bottom of this cove, and then I'll mark this right here, which is where the cove begins. So here I've marked the length of the cove, the bottom of the cove, and where it begins and ends. This is an asymmetrical cove, but I can see that from my pattern. I'm going to look at where the largest diameter of this piece is and mark that, and that's about there. And I'm going to mark what the bottom is, and that's about right there. And then my students used to tell me at university that they weren't good at drawing circles, but I'm good at drawing circles. As long as I've got my friend the lathe here with me. Okay. So this one here, we're going to use some calipers, outside calipers, and I'm first going to cut down to the diameter of the rim of this vase, which is, I'm going to set the calipers just slightly over that dimension, which will give me a little bit of room for doing a cleanup cut. So I can cut in there a ways, and then pretty soon I'll pick up my calipers, outside calipers. This is a peeling tool. It gets a lot of wood out of the way and does it with a clean cut. Now I'll use the calipers. As this wood decreases in diameter, there, the caliper just slipped over. And so that's set to the diameter of the calipers. And I can take my spindle roughing gouge, and I'm actually going to, this is a little trick that I didn't show the students in the class, but I'm going to take some masking tape, put it along the tool rest, but not where my tool is going to be contacting. And I can make marks where those critical dimensions are. And then if I happen to turn one of my marks away, I know where it's at. Because I am going to turn one of my marks away. This is the largest diameter. This is where the cove begins. From here to here, I can take all of this material down to that spot, right? So we'll do that. Spindle roughing gouge gets a lot of wood out of the way in a hurry. Okay, now I'm going to take my parting tool. I'll use this peeler. This is a 3/8 peeler. I'll come in where I put that mark at. Start the cut. Now I need to measure the vase. I've already turned to this diameter. Now I'm going to the next diameter. Which is about that. I'll set this just a little bit over. Going to widen the cut a little bit so the tool doesn't bind. And there's that diameter. Next I will set it for, doesn't really matter that much which order you do this in, and if I was doing several of these vases and I wanted them to be the same size and dimensions, like if you're doing some table legs, I would have 4 sets of calipers and I would set them and just keep them there. And that would be time, it would save time, and it would also be more accurate. Now I'll get the largest diameter. It's about right there. And that's pretty much where we're at. So I'll go down and get the smallest diameter, or at the base, which isn't quite the smallest diameter, and that's going to be down there. Now I'm going to turn most of that wood away, but not all of it, because I want to have a little bit more support while I'm turning the rest of this. I want to have more support than what the bottom of this will give me. So this one I'm going to turn on the left side of the line, so the top of that cut, or the top side of that cut, will be the bottom of the vase. Okay, so I've got some wood that's just kind of in the way. I'll peel it off. I can do that with a peeler like this, or with the skew. Need to move my tool rest a little bit to do this. So this in here, I can cut this down now. Another thing I'm going to do here is take a and get some wood out of the way, and take a pencil, put a line right there, right down in there, right there, and there. So as I'm turning these critical diameters, if I see my pencil line start to disappear, I know that I'm where I need to be or close to it. So now we've got this laid out. We've got the lengths, we've got the diameters. This is now just kind of like playing dot to dot, but on the lathe. We're just going to connect the dots and try to visually connect the curves. So, let's see. Little rough and gouge. I'm just going to take this down to that point. This down to that point, and now I'm going to go to a tighter gouge and turn the cove. Okay, I just want to double check something here. Okay, that shoulder is going to start about in the middle of that line. Okay, so there's that cove, there and there. Now this top little part, I'm going to cut that angle. It's on there. Now I'm going to go to a shallower gouge and cut from this large diameter to where that cove is supposed to begin. See how that looks. So far, not too bad. I'm getting a little vibration there, so I'm going to go to a smaller tool. It puts less pressure on the wood. So I'm controlling the cut by having the wood glide along on the bevel. The bevel is on the wood right behind the cut. Now it's time for me to go to the final diameter here at the base. And I can turn toward that. Okay, so far I've done pretty much all the work on here with parting tools and with gouges. I'm going to make this final cut on this with a skew, which will give me a little better surface than what I've been getting with the gouge. I like to raise the tool rest a bit with the skew. Okay, let's take a look at it. Form, outside form here is basically turned. I don't know if you can see that. The further away you get, the better it looks. I think we're okay. What's that?
Looks good.
So the chatter that you were getting, was that because you're too wide a tool? Or?
Well, I was using a wider tool than I needed on that, and it just set up a little bit of vibration, but it wasn't too bad, so I just made a lighter cut with a smaller gouge, and it worked fine. Now I'm going to sand this. I do want to define the bottom a little bit more. I'm not going to cut too far here, but just that much. I'll get the tool rest out of the way, and the cuts are pretty good. I'm not seeing any torn grain, so it shouldn't take too long to sand this. We start with 180 grit. I like to sand at a slower speed than what I turn. Yeah. And so I don't have to create too much sawdust from sanding. I'll just do this initial, probably just do this initial grit. We'll see how it looks. I don't want to have any torn grain anywhere, and as long as I can get rid of the torn grain with this, I can mount this back on the lathe when I get done with it and turn all of it except for the very bottom, well, and also on the inside. So right now I'm going to sand this, and it shouldn't take much.
You want the vacuum? I can hold the vacuum for you.
That'd probably be good if...
Or Jeff can.
This bead down here, I'm being careful as I sand this to not sand away any of my crisp lines on either side of it. So I'll wrap the sandpaper around my finger and kind of match the cove that I'm sanding.
Looking for a plug, Jeff? The other end.
Sand that little surface. It's really clean, actually. Barely soften those edges. I don't want to round them. I do want to keep them nice and crisp. Okay. So now that Jeff's got the vacuum set up, we're done with the sanding.
I'll just do this right here.
Oh, there's not very nice, very nice.
I'm going to touch that up for you.
Here, let's go ahead and get this powder off of here. I was just giving him a hard time. Okay, good.
Question on your sanding, on your large surfaces, I understand you use the paper and your finger in the coves, but you haven't, what's your thoughts on the drill and the pad?
For bowls, I use them. For spindles, I don't, generally speaking.
How about the perforated paper?
Perforated.
Ones that are meshed?
Oh, you know, I haven't used that much. When I have, it's worked fine. It's not one that I keep a stock of, but so I don't have a lot of opinion on that, actually, because I haven't had much experience with it. So there were my marks giving me my critical lengths that I didn't have to measure them again.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
What's that?
Good idea.
Good tip.
Ah, probably brilliant, right? You think? All right. Okay, now what I want to do on this is I want to see if I can make a transition from, well, first I've got to drill the hole, but from the hole that I'm going to drill here, I'm going to think about where the hole is, and I want to make this wall thickness here be kind of consistent going down this rim until it gets into the hole. So as you look like it does define the thickness of what kind of would look like the wall would be all the way through. And then I'll sand it down here so that as far as you can see and feel, you don't feel the transition between the drilled hole and the turned hole. That's what I'm after, at least. But I need to get a little bit of wood out of the way first here. You won't be able to see this. This can be a little bit of a tricky cut because I'm turning right into end grain. I'll change that in a minute.
Sorry, your microphone was all filled with.
So while he was doing that, I got a little teeny snatch here. And I've got to turn out. All right, that's as far as I want to go there. Actually, I did the same thing. I need to be more careful as I take the tool out. Okay. I kind of sensed that someone was feeling intimidated because things were going so well for me. just so that you can feel better. Is that okay?
Explain what happened so that they'll understand.
What's that?
Explain what just happened so they'll understand.
Well, I actually had gone in and made the cut. You can see a little spiral line right there. I had totally made the cut, and I was sloppy in bringing my tool out. And it just touched as I came out and made that little... But fortunately, it wasn't very deep. The first one was when Rob bumped me. The second one, I did the same thing right there. I just wasn't paying attention. So somebody here needs a repeat of this so you really understand it, right? I think that somebody might be me right now. I need to focus on what I'm doing here instead of what I'm saying, or I'm not going to have any neck left on this vase. All right. Now I'm going to take a drill bit.
Nice to cover.
Actually, I want to get a little bit more wood out of there. That tool I was using just a minute ago, it's called a detail gouge. It put more details in than I wanted. So I'll take the tail center out. We'll put a half-inch drill bit. I've got a plastic test tube that is this diameter on the outside that I can go in with. So my hope here is that this will line up perfectly, that when I turn on the lathe, it'll run true, and it's running perfectly true. It probably wouldn't be doing that if I had not have cleaned the end and made a new pilot hole and then brought the tailstock in. Turn that speed down a little bit. Let that drill bit find center, and then I'll lock the tailstock into position. Now you can see as I'm going in, the drill bit's wobbling a little bit now, and that's probably just from the grain of the wood pulling it off a little bit, because it went in perfectly straight to begin with, but grain has a tendency to do that. Not so much in metals, but wood will do it. Okay, last cut. I noticed somebody starting to doze off over here, so I put it in squeal mode.
Wake them up.
Yeah, I put the drill bit in squeal mode. I've got them trained.
Is that a special wood chuck or?
Well, it's a drill chuck. It could be used on a metal lathe or a wood lathe, actually.
Tightened by the knurl?
Yeah, it's keyless.
Yeah,
No key.
it's a keyless chuck.
Yeah, it's a Jacob's chuck.
Yeah, it's a Jacob's chuck, a keyless chuck. Okay, we can move that out of the way. We don't need that. Okay, the next cuts in here are kind of tricky.
Is your plastic still centered?
We'll see. Let's turn it on and see.
I'm just wondering what the drill was.
The drill was going out wobbling?
Well, yeah.
I think it's running dead true. It's because of the grain in the wood, and that happens a little bit, especially if you're drilling deep.
That little chatter that Lou was asking about, my experience is you got imperfection in the center of the wood. You know, sometimes you get a little hollow spot in there.
Right.
And it's a little scattered.
Yeah, I don't think this wood had any imperfections like that. Now I'm getting a little bit of vibration, and I expect to on this. I'm turning right into end grain actually with this. I'll change that in a minute. But I'm a ways away. You know, the headstock's clear down here because we got the wood and then we got the chuck. Now to get this so that it is a nice smooth transition, I'm going to support it with my hand. Can't take too heavy of a cut, or the wood says, hey, you're taking too heavy of a cut. Now that's pretty much straight into end grain. Now I'm going to take the tool, put it into a scraping position, and take light scraping cuts from the inside out.
You can't do it from the outside in.
Pardon?
That'll all it right in if you do it the other way.
Well, I did most of it actually from up here just a minute ago, but to make that transition there clean, I want to come this way or end up tearing the grain. And sometimes the wood doesn't want to cut into end grain, but this would actually cut pretty nicely, so I went with it. So I'm going to take some sandpaper, kind of break the adhesive backing on there, and then roll it into a bit of a tube, kind of a cone-shaped tube. Where's Jeff in the vacuum when you need it?
I'm holding a microphone now. Sorry, everyone. Time to train.
Rob found his calling in life here. Pretty good at it, actually.
I'm a sucker.
Okay. So, nice and smooth. Unless you've got a little teeny finger, you can't really tell where that turned part ends and the drilled part begins. I'm going to sand this a little bit finer. Now, I'm not going to put finish on this vase. If I were to put finish on the vase, I would actually have done the coat on the outside just before I removed the support from the tailstock, which allows you to be a little bit more aggressive on applying finish. Or I could do it now. This is seems to be feeling pretty stable, but so we'll just go that far. I'm going to go just a little bit more though, because I won't be able to get to this part later on if I want to make it finer. So I'm going to go to 220. And then looks like it goes to 400. Usually we would hit 320 in there, but okay, so that inside part I'm not going to be able to get to later on, so I took that a little bit further as far as the sanding goes. Okay. Now I need to separate it, and let's see, Rob, I'm going to need you to use your little cutoff saw in just a minute.
Yeah. Greeks. I don't want to see something close up.
It's okay?
Yeah.
What do you think of it, sir?
I just said it has.
That's just we need to get a baker to do some woodwork.
Okay, and then I So I'm going to take a finer parting tool. The parting tool I've been using so far is actually a simple peeler, 40-degree angle, tool handle low. But I'm going to get a finer parting tool so I can cut off the bottom.
Of his own design, I might add.
As I do this, I'm going to, this is a peeling cut. Should be very appealing.
Dad joke.
Is that like the worst dad joke you ever heard? You may be the apple of your mother's eye, but you're not even appealing to me. How's that? That's a dad joke. So I'm going to, so you can see this makes a narrow part. This is 3/32 of an inch, and I'm going to go in and go slightly undercut so that this will sit flat. I'm not going to go all the way through because I want to leave a little bit of wood to help me center the tailstock when I remount this, because I'm not just going to part the bottom off. I'm going to cut it off and then remount it and turn the bottom so it looks nice and finished. We'll do that in a minute. See it start to wobble a little bit? That tells me, okay, you're living on the edge. That's enough.
You're starting to wobble.
I just want to see if I can make you nervous. All right. What am I in? RobCosman's world famous.
That's not mine.
I know, I'm in Robcosman's world famous shop, and I'm not using a Cosman saw. What's up with that?
Oh, yeah.
I haven't graduated yet, I guess, to the Cosman saw. Do you want to come up and catch this, Rob? I'm being careful to not touch the vase that's going to be the finished part. So that's why I left myself a little bit of space. It's singing to us. You hear that? Okay.
Turn.
Now we'll get the chuck off the lathe. Now we're going to take our Jacob's chuck with the drill bit and put it in the headstock. We'll put a cone point tail center in the tailstock instead of the cupping point. This allows me to work closer down in. And now we're going to put the vase on like this. We'll use the drill bit as a drive mandrel. Now this, I'm guessing that this is going to wobble a little bit when I turn it on because the drill bit looked like it might have let off a little bit. But it looks like it's pretty close, but I can, if I need to, I can tweak that just the smallest amount and line it up. So I'm going to turn this on. Let's see. I'm going to go slower. Okay. And if I don't get this dead on perfect, it doesn't matter, but pretty close. I can live with that. So this next cut that I'm going to make is kind of the tricky and most critical cut of the whole thing, because I'm going to enter right here, and if I'm not careful and hold the tool just right, it'll go zhit, and it'll thread up the piece. I don't want that to happen. If I've ever had it happen, I had wished it hadn't happened. And I'm going to put a little detail line right there, just so this vase tells people that it's been remounted on the lathe and turned instead of just sanded. Before I take it off of there, I'm going to sand what I can. This might be good enough. 220, that's what I want, some 220. I'm going to soften this corner here just a little bit. If I turn the lathe speed down, the sandpaper will follow the shape of the vase, which is moving a little bit, but not too bad. Sand as far as I can reach. And then I'll do the last little bit. In just a second, this is going to separate and it'll start to wobble a little bit more, and it'll be okay. Going to support the tool with my thumb and just nibble off that last little bit so that we don't have to do any hand carving at all. Now, if the drill bit would have drilled perfectly straight in, this would be running perfectly true. But we can work with the way it is right now. So.
How many years you been doing this?
Pardon?
How many years you been doing this?
This vase I just started like 20 minutes ago.
You got to, Louis.
How many years?
He asked how long I'd been turning this vase.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at, you still got all your fingers.
Yeah, you know, my father owned a cabinet factory when I was in junior high and high school, and that's where I got my start woodworking. I can finish that up later. But I started turning in 77 or 78, so you can do the math. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The Greeks would be
You know what? I should have invited you to stand up and rest your back before I had you clap, and then I could tell my family I got a standing ovation, but I wasn't on the spot enough for that. Yeah, yeah, you can do that. Oh, I thought you were going to pass it.
Just tell us,
He fades back.
tell us what was your worst, you have to have a mishap.
All right, well, I had this one kid.
Related to this.
Oh, okay. I've got 5 kids. No. Yeah, my wife and I have 5 kids. We've been married 47 years. She's actually on her way right now from Springville to join. She'll be here tomorrow, and I've got an awesome family. But mishaps as far as turning. I've had some, like everybody who's done a fair amount of turning, I've had the occasional piece blow up and things like that. But as far as a possible bad accident while turning, I was turning one time, and I was doing a vessel, an artistic vessel out of box elder burl that had some bark inclusions. And you look at those burls and you read them best you can to figure out where the structure is and where it isn't. And the bark inclusion just went deeper than I thought that it did. I was turning on my lathe. I did have a face shield on. And I had my nephew just across the room a little bit working on my workbench doing some really intricate carving. And anyway, I went what I didn't think was too deep, but for the wood it was too deep, and it blew up into 2 or 3 pieces. One of them hit me right in the face shield. It smashed. It didn't hurt me. It could have been really bad, but it hit the face shield. The earpiece cut my ear a little bit just from the force of it, but I was fine. And another piece went up and hit the lights above me, so the shop went mostly black, and there's big bang, it goes mostly black, and here's my poor nephew over here doing this really intricate work turning, and he's like, it really surprised him. Surprised both of us, but especially him. But so I've had a couple of those where had I not been wearing a face shield, they would have been bad. But I was wearing a face shield. The face shield protected me, and I was fine. So I've been fortunate. I've done tens of thousands of pieces, and have my fingers and toes, most of my mind. My eyes are okay. So
Show us how you would use your toes.
my toe. Well, yeah. If you're not careful, you can miss some toes in the shop as well. What do we got? We're at 8:20. You want more?
You do your potato?
Yeah, I can. You want me to do a potato? Okay.
Turn a potato?
So I'll tell you a little story about this. There was a professional turner who used to turn, I believe his name was Dennis Elliott. I don't think he's been turning for a long time. But he used to take turnips and other kind of root kind of bulbous plants and put them on the lathe and turn them into, they were small, but he turned them into very thin-walled vessel forms, and then he soaked them in lacquer, and they would shrink up and go kind of crinkly, and they were really unique. So I thought, it looks like that could be fun, and so I want to give that a try. I didn't have any of those turnips, but I did have a potato. So this looks like it could maybe be something that I could turn and then soak in lacquer. And so I went out in the shop, I put a potato on, and I was making this thing. It didn't come out to be anything that I could use what I had intended for. But as I was turning it, I saw these potato shavings cruising off of here, and I must have been near supper time or something, because I thought, man, those things look good. I should stick those in some oil and cook them up. So I did. And so I don't know of anybody else who did this before me. It might have happened, but as far as I know, that's kind of how we discovered making curly fries on the lathe. And so I've done that little demonstration. I'm going to need a pan or a plate or something if somebody can run to the kitchen and grab one. But lots of times in the classes I taught at BYU in my beginning woodworking class, the last day of the semester, when all of the students showed their furniture, told about it and everything, we we had kind of a meal and brought things in. Students brought stuff in, and I did, and I had one last demonstration for them, and then they had to earn their dinner, and that was they had to turn the fries. So they all got a shot at turning the fries, and I had a couple commercial type pots for cooking them, and it was fun. It was kind of a fun thing every semester. So I've shown this a lot of times, but I need to have, this is a two-person process here. So I need somebody to help me out here. So, Jeff, do you want to come up and do this?
He's going to eat them? What are you going to?
I was gonna lay it under the lathe and catch them in my mouth.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So here's a spud. Here's a plate. That's going to be your supper. So the hardest part of this is actually catching the potatoes.
All right, here we go. No pressure.
You need a little red hat.
I'm using just kind of a standard drive center and tail center. I'll go to a smaller tool rest right now. Now, if we had some good avocado oil,
You're really making me do those.
Yeah, you said you needed a firm potato for this.
yeah, firm is better than mushy. So I'm just going to put this on here. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered, but I'll try to kind of center it by eye. Regular 4-spur center actually works better than this Steb multi-spur, but this will be all right. Now, depending on the shape you want your shavings in cross-section, you could use a skew and you could get really thin ones that would just come off like that. You could use a peeler. The ones that I like best, we're going to cut with a bowl gouge. And I had my bowl gouge here, but I'm going to have to know what happened to it. They're a sharp. There we go. That's a 3/8. Do we have a 1/2 inch one?
Can make reservations for us.
There we go.
Reservations at a restaurant.
Thank you, Scott. All right, come in here, Jeff. Jeff's been the assistant at the class, so he gets to be assistant here. I don't know if that's a get to or have to, but the pressure's on because these things are flying off here and you've got to catch them.
I'm ready.
And you don't have your safety glasses on.
I don't. Excuse me one moment.
Okay.
Now I can't see anything. Unless I'm this close. What's that, sir?
Say something with ketchup.
Yeah. Okay, you ready?
Wish me luck.
Yeah. Okay, they're going to come somewhere out here. Might be a little closer. Okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
Getting smaller diameters, ready to turn the speed up.
Delicious.
Yeah, don't those things look great? They are good. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, one more. It's going to have to be closer
Okay. Coming in.
because I've got a smaller diameter.
All right.
Okay, now I could take my parting tool and come in here and make little branches, and I could make a parting tool potato tree and we could cook it up, and that would be good too. But there you go. There's your lathe fries. You got to try it. Without where'd the shavings come from? Yeah, let's give Jeff a hand. He's a natural. Okay, well, you've been a good group. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you being here. Turn the time back over to Rob.
Mike's there for questions. If they want to ask, just so the audience and the YouTube can hear.
Any questions?
Step center. What do you
Hold
got
on,
there
Louis.
What do you got there for the step center?
Well, you can see that it's got a lot of points on it instead of the 4-prong.
What brand is it? Is it?
What brand?
Yeah.
You know, I'm not actually sure what brand of this is. I bought this just a couple, 3 weeks ago from Craft Supplies, USA in Provo, which is just a few miles from where I live. It's got a spring-loaded point. It doesn't mar the wood very much, but it holds it well.
Well, I just bought one, but I had to get it from England to Sorby, but I didn't know you could get them locally, like, oh, this is pretty well locally.
Well, yeah, so I live in Springville, Utah. That's local,
Oh,
right?
yeah, no, it's
Which, in comparison to England, it's
Yes, it
local,
is,
right?
yeah. It's down the hill.
Yeah, and Springville is right next to Provo. That's where Craft Supplies is. And for 32 years, I would pass Craft Supplies twice a day on my way to and from work, and I've spent a lot of money there.
Is that Woodcraft?
Craft Supplies. Craft Supplies USA. They specialize in wood turning only.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Craft supplies. Okay.
Craft Supplies USA. Right. Yeah. So that's where I got this
We're a
one.
little closer to England here, so we
Oh,
know.
yeah.
I got the Sorby here, I see, you got a Sorby chisel over there.
I've got quite a few tools that came from England, out of
Chip,
Sheffield.
somebody's asking a question about your chisel handles.
My chisel handles.
I
Okay.
think it's an online question.
So I have a series of turning tools that I've developed. Some of them are standard tools that have been around for a while, but the handle that I put them in is my own design, and I like it. And then I also have a parting tool that is my own design that I don't know that you can get anywhere else. These are all spindle tools, and for spindle turning, I do a lot of spindle turning, and I like to have a handle that is bigger than the little cigar type handles that they call them, but smaller than the bowl turning ones, or the ones that are kind of between spindle turning and bowl turning. Because when you're spindle turning, at least the turning that I do, I make a lot of little detail work. I'll pass this around and it'll be an example of that. And you need to be able to really feel what's happening at the tip of the tool. And so I don't use tools that have long handles or super short handles, but long handles or really heavy handles. I like a good balance. And these have worked out well. These are, I don't know what they are, 10 or 12 inches long. I'd have to measure them, not sure.
Find that?
Pardon? Yeah, so I designed the parting tool. That just kind of shows some of the detail that I usually work with. And the handles, they have a foam handle on the end of them. I have a groove there where you can put in the set screw or the Allen wrench so that you don't lose it. It's always with the tool. And this particular parting tool is designed as a peeling parting tool. So you come in, the long bevel is up, you can come with a low angle, and you can work high on the wood, and you can get a nice peeling cut all the way through there. When you're using a peeling angle, the wood doesn't have to change direction very much to get cut, and so you end up with a cleaner cut.
I like that parting tool, that's very nice. Now, I noticed on your tool, you've kind of used you haven't gone to the thumbnail sharpening.
The what?
You haven't gone to the thumbnail type of sharpening. You've gone straight spindle off the grinder. You haven't rounded the angles.
Well, I mean, this is what typically is referred to as a fingernail grind.
Yeah, right.
It is very long and since I do a lot of detail, I've ground these. They have a 40-degree angle on them, and they're fairly long, so I can get into tight corners. Yeah, and especially with this little one here, I can get into corners almost as tight as what you can do with the skew.
That's pretty, now 40 degrees angle. A standard, or is that something you can come up with? Is that-
No, 40, I mean, most spindle gouges are usually ground 35 to 45. I do mine at 40 or slightly less.
Works for you.
So, yeah, so it's fairly standard.
Bend that in there.
Show them your double-ended one.
Oh, well.
That's good,
So
good use of.
Now, I have a couple of tools that have, is it over here? Yeah, I have a couple of tools where The shaft fits in. I mean, other people have done with this was gouges, where they'll have one gouge grind on one end and another gouge grind on the other end. That one is actually not one of those. But
I like that.
Yes.
so this is a skew on one end, and the peeler, which I was using for doing most of the parting with calipers on the other end. Pretty straightforward and simple, but
Didn't you say it was also easier sometimes to sharpen by taking the handle off?
oh yeah, well, especially if you're using a commercial sharpening fixture, they take up some space about that much, and if you've got a tool where you've got wood sticking out or metal sticking out, and then the flute beyond that, quite often you have to stop grinding when you get about 2 inches of flute still left on the tool, which is actually the most stable part of a gouge, because the grinding fixture runs into the ferrule. But if you can take it out of your tool handle, then, so I use these metal tool handles instead of wood ones, because wood ones, they're usually fixed in. If you can take it out of the tool handle, then you can sharpen it and use it right down until the flute's completely gone.
So have you purchased these handles from that company?
No, I make the handles. Yes, my oldest daughter and her husband own a machine shop,
Okay.
and I've designed them, and we make them there.
These aluminum, is it, or steel? Just-
Hmm?
No, no.
Well, the blades are high-speed steel, the handles are aluminum.
Oh, yeah, okay. We'll cut a potato with that.
What's that?
He's gonna go home and do a potato with it. I know I am.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate you being here. I know these fellows in the class, it's been a long day, so you put up with me for another
and they're
couple of
not done.
hours. That's to be commended.
All right, overtime.
Thank you very much, Kip.
Thank you.
You should have made a bigger bowl and we could have passed it around.